You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Let's begin with the headlines we're tracking at the moment. Israel and Hezbollah exchanged the heaviest cross-border strikes yet on Sunday since their ongoing conflict began after the 7th of October, but stopped short of an all-out war. Ryan Evans, a member of the Reuters team covering the war in Ukraine, was killed, and 2 Reuters journalists were injured in a strike on a hotel in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk. Messaging app Telegram has said its CEO, Pavel Durov, who was detained in France on Saturday, has nothing to hide. But Mr. Durov was arrested at an airport north of Paris under a warrant for offences related to the app. NASA has decided that 2 astronauts currently stuck on the International Space Station will only return next February on a SpaceX Crew Dragon flight, where 2 seats have been made available for Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore. The United Nations office in Geneva is adopting a series of cost-saving measures as it faces an unprecedented budget crisis. Bangladesh scripted history as they recorded their maiden test win over Pakistan at the Rawalpindi Cricket Stadium. And Australians will be allowed to ignore their bosses outside of working hours under a new right to disconnect law that comes into force today. Well, our big focus, Israel and Hezbollah on Sunday exchanged the heaviest cross-border strikes yet since their ongoing conflict began after the 7th of October, but stopped short of an all-out war. Now, Israel said it preemptively targeted dozens of Hezbollah launch sites before the Iran-backed militant group actually fired hundreds of rockets at Israeli military targets, which it said was the first phase of its retaliation for Israel's assassination of a senior leader. But this exchange could impair Sunday's high-stakes Gaza ceasefire negotiations in Cairo, but both sides signaled they were backing down for now, dampening fears of a wider war. We have a string of reactions lined up for you. Listen in.
We have been concerned about the conflict escalating into an all-out regional war since October 7th, and we have worked round the clock with partners and allies, moving military assets, engaging in intensive diplomacy, both publicly and privately behind the scenes, to avert that outcome. We continue to work to avert that outcome. And our hope is that the events of last night do not spill out into an escalation that leads to regional war.
In a major escalation increasing the fears of larger regional conflict, Israel and Hezbollah exchanged heavy fire using missiles, rockets and drones in one of the biggest clashes in more than 10 months of cross-border attacks. Israel claims preemptive strikes that struck thousands of rockets inside southern Lebanon thwarted a bigger attack being planned by Iran-backed militia Hezbollah. Israeli military says Hezbollah was planning to launch these rockets into Israel, which prompted the nation to declare a 48-hour state of emergency, warning citizens to expect incoming strikes. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu assured the state of Israel will do anything to ensure the security and protection of its citizens.
אני מבקש מכם, אזרחי ישראל, להישמע להנחיות פיקוד העורף. אנחנו נחושים לעשות הכל כדי להגן על המדינה שלנו, להחזיר את תושבי הצפון בבטחה לבתיהם, ולהמשיך לקיים כלל פשוט. מי שפוגע בנו, אנחנו פוגעים בו.
Soon after, Hezbollah announced it had launched an attack on Israel as an initial response to the killing of one of its top commanders in an Israeli airstrike in Beirut last month. Hezbollah called the attack phase 1 of a series of retaliatory strikes. However, both sides have since announced the conclusion of their military missions, stating only military targets were attacked. At least 3 people were killed in the strikes on Lebanon, while there were no reports of casualties in Israel. The heavy exchange comes amidst ongoing high-level talks in Cairo, Egypt, aimed at evolving a truce proposal that would end the now nearly 11-month-long war on Gaza and release the scores of hostages held by Hamas. Hezbollah had previously stated it will continue its attack until a ceasefire deal is finalized. The strikes impacted several flights to Tel Aviv and Beirut on Sunday, which were either delayed or suspended. Tensions are at an all-time high as the fresh strikes threaten to engulf the wider region in a bloody conflict. The focus shifts to the crucial ceasefire talks in hope of achieving the so far elusive peace and stability in the battle-torn region. With Sami Afsar, Bureau Report for NDTV World.
לפני 3 שבועות אנחנו חיסלנו את הרמטכ"ל שלו, היום סיכלנו את תוכנית התקיפה שלו, נסראללה בביירות וחמינאי בטהרן. צריכים לדעת שזהו צעד נוסף בדרך לשנות את המצב בצפון ולהחזיר את תושבינו בבטחה לבתיהם, ואני חוזר ואומר, זה לא סוף פסוק.
Well, Middle East expert Faisal Asghaf joins us now for further clarity on the current situation. Faisal, thanks so much for making time for us on the World 24/7. Now, some argue that Israel does not have the stamina for another front and Hezbollah cannot risk its military and financial assets in Lebanon. But what's your assessment? You think both sides have compelling reasons not to go to war right now?
Yes, what we saw yesterday between Hamas and Israel, between Hezbollah and Israel, saw that both sides so restrained to open all-out war among them, because Hezbollah right now is different between comparing with the Hezbollah when the war between Hezbollah and Israel erupted in 2006. Hezbollah now is more danger and fearful for Israel. As we know, a few months ago, 3 Hezbollah drones have recorded 3 times has recorded strategic and vital assets and infrastructure in Israel, like the military base and also naval base and Haifa airport. I think both sides realize if the war and open all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah erupted, that will cause massive distraction for both sides.
Right, but meanwhile, political watchers actually argue that if Israel and Hezbollah wanted to go for an all-out war, it would have happened a long time ago. Each side would have welcomed the discussion of each other. But the time has not been right so far for either of them to plunge into a full-scale war. What do you think are the reasons? What's causing this hesitation?
Yes, the hesitation because both sides, they realize how powerful each other. I mean, Israel is a powerful country in military context, and also Hezbollah. As we know, what Hezbollah did yesterday, they only fire Katyusha rockets, not other missiles that have a powerful distraction, like Fajr or like Iskander. They had it.
So is it fair at the moment, Faisal, to say that Benjamin Netanyahu has good reason to keep Israel in a state of conflict, as it sort of helps fend off a reckoning with the electorate and the courts where he faces corruption charges?
Yes. I think what Netanyahu have done during this over 10 months is only to keep his private interest to keep his position in the power as a prime minister. That's why he now is using a new strategy to kill Hamas leaders like Ismail Haniyeh and also Hezbollah leaders, Hassan Nasrallah right hand, Fuad Shukur in Beirut. I think that both incidents have raised the popularity of Netanyahu in Israel, but the possibility of the all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel still open as long as the war in Gaza still continues.
Well, Faisal, thank you so much for making time for us on the World 24/7 and joining us with your opinion.
Okay, Yarmo.
Meanwhile, the other big story we're tracking, a safety advisor working with the Reuters team, was actually killed in an airstrike in Ukraine, and 2 other journalists were injured. In fact, this strike happened at a hotel in the eastern part of Ukraine. A British man, in fact, was killed in this strike, we're told. The strike hit the Hotel Sapphire in the city of Kramatorsk on Saturday, where a 6-person Reuters team had been lodging. This is what an official statement says. Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine exchanged 115 prisoners of war from each side after the United Arab Emirates acted as an intermediary. Now, this is actually the first such exchange since Ukraine launched a surprise attack into Russia's Kursk region on the 6th of August, which was the biggest attack inside Russian territory by a foreign power since World War II. Now, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, the Russian servicemen swapped were captured in the Kursk region. Well, switching tracks, Telegram CEO Pavel Durov was arrested in Paris as part of a probe into the messaging app's content moderation. The 39-year-old Russian-born billionaire fled the country in 2014 after facing pressure from Moscow for not suppressing opposition voices on his social media platform. He can hardly be called a Russian patriot, this is what a state media outlet wrote, but several Kremlin figures slammed the arrest as politically motivated. In fact, ex-owner Elon Musk himself, in the EU's crosshairs over content moderation, said the arrest was an attack on free speech. But Pavel Durov, though was born in Russia and he lives in Dubai now, where Telegram is based. He holds dual citizenship of the United Arab Emirates and France. And Telegram, as you are well aware, is popular among Russians. It's also popular among Ukrainians, and it's popular in the former Soviet Union states. The app was banned in Russia in 2018 after a previous refusal by him to hand over user data, but the ban was actually reversed in 2021. And with Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, and WeChat, Telegram is actually ranked as one of the major social media platforms. Well, we have with us independent tech policy researcher Pranesh Prakash, who's also an affiliated fellow at Yale Law School's Information Society Project. Thank you so much, Mr. Prakash, for joining us. Would you say overall Telegram's system of moderating extremist and illegal content is significantly weaker than that of other social media companies and messenger apps?
That's a frequent accusation, but I don't think that it's warranted. If you look at competing apps such as Signal, which is fully end-to-end encrypted and puts in place multiple barriers, such as being able to join various groups without actually revealing to each other who's exactly joined and so on, and being able to add people using pseudonyms. In all those ways, Signal actually poses a bigger threat. Yet it's surprising that it's Telegram that the French authorities have gone after rather than fully end-to-end encrypted apps like Signal, which make it even more difficult to monitor than Telegram.
In fact, many argue that Mr. Durov's arrest is an assault on the basic human rights of speech and association. Do you endorse this belief?
Currently, it's difficult to tell because there are very few details out in the public domain as to the exact crimes that he is accused of and the evidence to back up those accusations. But what I can say is there's a great deal of hypocrisy. If this same kind of action had been undertaken by, say, Russia or by China, then the EU would be up in arms about the human rights, about intermediary liability, how the person who's running a network is not responsible for the content and actions of those who are using the network, and so on. And in fact, under the Digital Services Act in the EU, there's an explicit prohibition of on requiring a general obligation to monitor what's going on a platform. And so in all these ways, the laws seem to favor Mr. Durov, but and there's clearly hypocrisy here from the European authorities, from the French authorities. in terms of the kinds of actions that they have taken, and saying that it's fully justified, while if these actions had taken place in other kinds of regimes, they would be up in arms and talking about human rights at this moment.
Right, certainly. But you know, Mr. Prakash, Telegram, as you know, does allow a group of up to about 2 lakh members, which critics have argued makes it much easier for misinformation to spread, for users to share conspiracist, neo-Nazi, pedophilic or terror-related content. In fact, if I may inform our viewers, just what happened a few weeks ago in the UK, the app was actually scrutinized for hosting far-right channels that were instrumental in organizing the violent disorder in English cities earlier this month. But so things aren't all rosy for Telegram as we speak at the moment, right?
That's true about any social network that we have. That is true about Facebook, that is true about Twitter, and so on.
Right.
The question here is who should be held responsible for content on a social network? Should it be the people who are actually sending it, the people who are acting upon that content? Because let's remember that merely the act of sending a message containing misinformation by and of itself is not a violation of any law in most parts of the world. It is doing so maliciously and they're generally, even under, for instance, the UK's Online Safety Act, there are other requirements. Now, the question is, are those people who are actually engaging in this kind of activity, are they the ones you should go after as a government, or the people who are running the social network? Now, let's be clear. There are all kinds of people, all kinds of authorities around the world who would want to get rid of all kinds of information under the name of misinformation, regardless of whether the parties who are actually engaged in that discussion think so or not. There is no universal definition of misinformation. It's malleable in the hands of power. And so I would definitely not single out Telegram for this. I would say it's a genuine problem that we're facing right now, especially with the rise of encrypted chat networks, especially with the rise of things like Signal, which make it even harder to monitor and to pinpoint who sent what, when, and so on. And if Telegram has not been responding to valid legal orders that have come from French courts regarding specific content sent by specific people, then in that case there might be a case to put forward for obstruction of justice or something of that kind. But in the absence of any such details, this seems like a crackdown on freedom of speech to me.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Prakash, for joining us on The World 24/7 and shedding light on some very pertinent aspects of this debate. Well, with that, let's turn our attention now to the United States. Well, Kamala Harris's presidential campaign has raised $540 million since its launch last month. This is what her team has confirmed, calling it a record for any campaign in history. The US Vice President got $82 million in donations during last week's Democratic convention, where she accepted her historic nomination, a third of which were from first-time contributors, according to her campaign. The cash boost does reflect Harris's surging momentum over her Republican rival Donald Trump only months before November's presidential election. But both candidates are now turning their attention to crucial swing states this week. Trump is actually set to campaign in Michigan and Wisconsin, and Harris will visit Georgia, where the two are neck and neck, according to recent polls. Well, news and updates continue in a moment. Don't go anywhere. We're slipping into a very short break. Well, Sunita Williams, as we speak, is stuck in space, and she may be there till February 2025. And she's not alone. Barry Butch Wilmore, who was with her, accompanying her on the International Space Station, is also there. And now SpaceX's Dragon capsule might be coming to their rescue, but only to bring them back home next year, as they have been stuck for months because the agency does not have confidence in Boeing's troubled Starliner capsule. My colleague Pallab Bagla has the lowdown for us.
NASA has decided that Butch and Sonny will return with Crew 9 next February, and that Starliner will return uncrewed.
NASA has confirmed that Indian origin astronaut Sunita Williams will now stay at the International Space Station till February 2025. Astronaut Sunita Williams and her crewmate Butch Wilmore went to the International Space Station on a Boeing Starliner in June 2024 on what was to be an 8-day mission. The 8-day mission has now been extended to 8 months. This is essentially because the Boeing Starliner, it was on its maiden crewed test flight, and the Starliner has been designed with the help of both Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, has faced problems. The Boeing Starliner has had issues with its thrusters, it has had helium leaks, and NASA says, in the interest of safety, the Boeing Starliner will now be brought back to Earth uncrewed, and the crew, astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, will now be reshuffled and brought back using SpaceX Crew Dragon in February 2025. Both Butch Wilmore and astronaut Sunita Williams are veteran astronauts. Sunita Williams, this is her third flight into space. She has spent long months in space. And when she went up, she had said, going to the space station was like going back home. So an 8-day mission being converted into an 8-month mission. And now the two astronauts will come back on the SpaceX Crew Dragon. This kind of reshuffling of spacecraft is new, and there will be many adjustments which NASA and Boeing will have to make for that. NASA chief Bill Nelson said this is being done because in the back of their minds, they had the accidents of the space shuttle in their mind, and they did not want to take any risk with the two astronauts being on board the Starliner and then bringing them back in a vehicle which was not functioning fully. So it's really egg on the face of Boeing, but Boeing still continues to say that the Starliner is safe and it will come back in an uncrewed flight and will perform its duty. NASA has also said that they will continue with the program of the Boeing Starliner, but as of now, astronaut Sunita Williams, who was to be in space for 8 days, has already spent over 2 months at the International Space Station, and now she will spend a full 8 months in the low Earth orbit around the Earth. The International Space Station has in all 9 astronauts there. They are all safe, and they will all come back to Earth sooner than later. The setback for the Boeing Starliner is big, but astronaut Sunita Williams will be back on Earth in February 2025, now traveling back on the SpaceX Crew Dragon. In New Delhi, Pallab Bagla for NDTV.
Well, the highly anticipated decision, one of the most consequential by the space agency in years, is a devastating blow to Boeing. With that, let's turn our attention to the other big story. Well, the UN office in Geneva is going through an unprecedented financial crisis. In fact, they've had to employ cost-saving measures, budgeting tactics, because member countries have not been paying their dues. And finally, Australians will be allowed to ignore their bosses outside of working hours under a new right to disconnect law. This comes into force today, and employees will be protected if they refuse to monitor, read, or respond to contact from their employers or clients outside of work, unless that refusal is unreasonable. This is what the official legislation states. It follows similar laws passed by countries including France, Portugal, and Kenya, which aim to counter the notion that thanks to cell phones, workers are always on to the detriment of their health. In fact, one study found Australians carry out an extra 281 hours of unpaid overtime each year. And in today's hyper-connected world, clearer boundaries between working time and rest are crucial. This is what a Melbourne-based management professor has also endorsed. Thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest updates for you. Do stay tuned.